Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Belinda.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really happy that you said yes to this interview. I'm really excited to be talking about iridology. I feel like not a lot of people know about it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your interest in it, and not just your interest, but you've had an interest in sharing it with a lot of other people. And then this, of course, is going to get shared with people. So I really do appreciate you.
Of course. Oh, good, good. Okay, so I'm here with Kyle Mays. He is an iridologist, and I'm going to start with your bio. Kyle is a diplomat of holistic iridology. Iridology is a 3,000-year-old art and science. The iris, sclera, and pupil of the eye show the veil the soul has created through consciousness or forgetfulness that reflects the illusion which prepares the soul for attaining the reality of full enlightenment. The eyes are the windows of the soul and can reveal our physical, emotional, and mental characteristics. Kyle helps to interpret those characteristics to help you evolve and heal. Kyle first became familiar with holistic healing and iridology over 20 years ago during a visit with Reuben Schwartz, an Amish man in the backwoods of Kentucky, where he learned many things about iridology, herbs, foods as medicine, and other natural healing practices from Reuben. Since then, Kyle has graduated from the International Institute of Iridology and trained under Dr. David J. Pisek, who is heralded as the new pioneer in iridology. Outside of iridology, Kyle has shared space and sat in ceremonial circles with many powerful healers, mentors, and teachers from all over the US. Kyle also offers other holistic healing practices with men's coaching, sobriety mentoring, Reiki, and meditation by guiding a person inward through his own spiritual healing experiences. He offers these in Amboy, Washington, where he is based. He believes the true nature of healing begins on the spiritual level first, then into the mental and emotional levels, and finally into the physical body. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was quite a bit and well read. So thank you, Belinda. That's good enough. I guess we could throw a farmer in on the end of that, and that's something that's redeveloped in the last couple of years of my life. I grew up as a farmer for the first 20 25 years of my life, and then had a disconnect from it, I'll say, until recently. So I'm back into that world now. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
for
and
another interview, we can go down that road.
right? Yeah, because you guys are practicing regenerative farming out at Fayou Farms.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big endeavor.
Yeah. I
What's the
love it
size?
though. It's good. Well, we're doing chickens and we're doing them for meat and eggs. We have sheep and fruits and vegetables. So we're trying to do all of our fruits and vegetables with no tillage, and we rotate the sheep and the chickens together in formation behind each other every day. So the sheep go first, they eat the grass down, and then we bring the meat birds behind them, and then the egg layers go behind them. And it's just a cycle of regenerating. And we believe that it's what's best for the soil. It's capturing carbon, it's making our footprints negative, and all the things we're just trying to do what we believe is the right way, the healthy way, the way that we want food to be produced, and not actually putting like this protest or activism behind it. It's more about what we stand for, not against.
Yes, yes, so well said. The values, right? It's putting our values into place and
Yeah.
living in. Yeah, I bet your food is wonderful because it's so enriched with like love from the land and from you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we feel it is. We think, and most people we've been able to share it with say they do. They tell the difference than what you can buy in a store. We're calling ourselves, kind of beyond organic is how we're describing it to people. I spent a lot of years in the natural foods world as a produce manager, and have been in and out of that world for I don't know how many times over the last 10 or 15 years. And I've bought what is the best in a natural food store. And there's still like this thing. Um, I still think it's best to buy and eat organic, but they're still missing a lot of things. And it's been kind of tainted over the last 20 or 30 years. It originally was about rebuilding soil. And gradually, big ag, big chemical has got their hands in it. It's got a little dirty, just like everything does over time. And so, there's certain chemicals that are still allowed in a USDA organic label. There's certain processes of how a chicken has to live and how it has to end its life according to organic. And it's still not the best way. And so we're trying to go beyond that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the conversation now seems like it's we're going back to the traditional ways. And so we talk about traditional, we don't, when we're talking about alternative ways of doing things and like alternative health therapies, that's actually traditional. And we need to really change the vernacular so that we understand that everything that we're experiencing now is really bastardized, right? And manipulated. So when we talk to farmers, like I've talked to farmers before, and they often say, like, yeah, we say it's not organic, it's just farming, and everything else is chemical based.
Yeah.
Right? So
It's
let's get
it's the
back to that.
original way. It was the only
Exactly.
way at one time.
Right, right, until the chemicals came in. So if we would continue to call it chemical based, then people understand that even though the organic can be chemical based just because of the designation of organic now, because of the FDA, USDA, whatever. And so it's really just understanding reciprocity in farming and regenerative practices and traditional.
Yeah. Yeah, we were around for a very long time, and we had food and medicine for a very long time. And before the early 1900s, and especially before the end of World War II, we didn't do any of this stuff this way. So we had it figured out, and then we made it complicated.
Right, right. All right, so let's dive back into iridology and the different perspective of health. Well, I want to go back to your bio, where, when I was reading it, you believe that the true nature of healing begins on the spiritual level first, then into the mental and emotional levels, and finally into the physical body, which, interesting enough, don't you think that the nature of a physical pain actually begins mentally and emotionally before it actually becomes a, a hurt on your body? Now, do you
Yeah.
believe perhaps spiritually also is the actual root?
Well, so disconnection from spirit or source is just like what we were just talking about with agriculture. It's we've gotten in such a rush, and we've complicated everything in society now. And so it's just it's it just depends on where you are spiritually. Like this won't be just a universal answer for everybody, but I feel like even if you are religious, whether you are belonging to a church or Christianity or whatever it is, it's really just about slowing down a little bit and realizing that there is this source, there is this power out here that is bigger than you. And all you got to do is slow down and give some appreciation for that. The same as we're talking about the land and the animals, all of this stuff is bigger than you, no matter who you are. So you even if you're not a even if you're on the fence as an agnostic, maybe even an atheist, just admitting that the sun, the moon, the ocean, the mountains, these trees, all these things that have been here way longer than you and will be here long after you is greater than you, and showing appreciation for that in some way, form, or fashion, just whatever feels good to you, is a start to being on a spiritual level.
Mhm.
Now, for me, I've changed that probably 5 times in my life. I was raised old fashioned missionary Baptist in the South, and I had a lot of questions. I wanted to know all the whys of why we're doing this and what does it really mean. And I never got any good answers. I always got the answer of just have the faith. And I'm not saying that having faith is bad. We do need to have faith. There's not always an answer for this stuff. But it led me down a path of just like, well, then this is just BS. I'm not going to follow this anymore. Nobody can explain anything to me. And I became very disconnected from source altogether. And I've had my own awakening at least 2 or 3 times since then, especially in 2020, and kind of started all over and kind of got to that point where I'm like, wow, I really can just sit with the sunrise or the sunset and just be quiet and sit there and be present. Presence is a big one too. That's a path of spirituality. Understanding that what we started talking about 5 minutes ago with agriculture is gone. It's not here anymore, and we have no idea what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. So just being present brings you into your spiritual connection. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was going all over the place there for a second, but it can mean so many things for so many people. And at the end of the day, we are in such a rush to find out everything, figure out everything, and just get to the future, get to the future. And it's really just about slowing down and being present and just acknowledging that there is a power greater than you and giving some thanks for that.
Yeah, gratitude. Gratitude is a big one.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on from that, the mental aspect is next, and it's before the emotional. We do create these thoughts in our heads that set the path for everything else that does eventually lead to the physical. So, we can go into each one, but it's like that's another just slowing down process and understanding that we do create a lot of these things in our heads, especially the worry and the fear and the anxieties. We create that. I can't remember the original quoter of this, but it's like the 85. I think it was the holistic psychologist. She's big on Instagram.
Yeah.
Uh, Said one time that 85% of everything that we think is going to happen to us never happens at all, and the other 15% is nowhere near as bad as we thought it was going to be. So just think, if we can just go into every single day that way, there's so many things we wouldn't create in our lives because we just didn't think it up. We didn't worry about it. We didn't create the anxiety and the fears and what's going to happen tomorrow, with our news cycles and all this stuff, who's going to be president, all these things. If we would just slow down and realize that whatever we're thinking is going to happen is probably not, and whatever does happen is not going to be near as bad as we're thinking it is. So,
Well,
yeah.
I'd like to add to that. I forget who I was listening to or reading, but they said worry is just praying for the things you don't want,
Yeah,
right?
that's very well said.
Because where we put our thoughts is what we create. And so, oh my gosh, and right now I'm reading. Have you ever read the Ringing Cedars series,
No.
Anastasia? Oh
Mm-mm.
gosh, I think it's like 10 books, but I'm on book 2. And in it, Anastasia is talking about how to transform the world. And she says, well, if everybody in the world would wake up and the first thing they think is beauty and peace and love, that would change humanity.
Yeah.
And like the guy that's talking with her was like, oh, come on, Anastasia, no one's going to do that. And she says, but you will do that because I've asked you to now. And so now there's 2 of us. And then once you write this book, more people will do that. Because think of how many people, as you're saying, with the rushing and rushing, how many people wake up in the morning and the first thing they think about is work or something, some responsibility of theirs, and not taking that pause to have appreciation for the things that are greater than us and setting our path for goodness and light in the world, because we wake up and we have appreciation and we say and we think loving thoughts and peace.
Yeah. Just a simple thank you that only takes 1 second when you first sit up in bed in the morning, and most of us don't make time for that.
No, we don't. It's like 1 minute. All right, let's talk about iridology. Tell us more about iridology.
Well, so uh, iridology is analyzing the iris, and so every organ in the body is represented in our eyes. Think of the eyeballs as the monitor to your computer. Everything is connected to that, and so it's one of the first things to form in our bodies. You see pictures of babies in wombs, on the internet all the time, and it's like we have this weird shaped head, and it's because The eyeball is just done forming at that point, and everything else is just an extension of that. And so, iris interpretation goes back at least 3,000 years. I mean, it goes all the way back to Chaldea, the cradle of knowledge, the area that we know now is like Baghdad, Iraq. Hippocrates spoke about the health of the eyes. It's mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Luke, of if it's when your eyes have light, they are whole, and if they are dark, the body is in bad health. That's not the exact quote in Luke, but it's mentioned so many times over the last 3,000 years. But I believe it to be the least invasive and most preventative practice that you can do to take control of your health. Everybody's had a shift, whether you go one way or the other, over trust in our medical system over the last few years. And I feel that this lays out the entire roadmap that you came into this world with, and gives you the opportunity to take full control of it. With a full comprehensive iris report like I do, you have the ability to know all your strengths, all your weaknesses, what you came in here and what you're working with, and the things that you can work on to improve those weaknesses. There's also the whole, like we were starting to talk about, the thoughts and emotions associated with that, because most of this report is laying out your predispositions. It's what you were born with. So you have the ability to know that things like grief and forgiveness and anger and resentment can impact all these parts of your body. Letting go when it comes to digestive and choline issues, and just gives you the opportunity to be the driver of your vehicle. When I hand you an iris report, I'm giving you the keys, and it's just up to you from there how you drive it. Yeah, it's just, the earlier you can see it, the better. There's no right or wrong time to do iris analysis. Yeah, I feel like that answered your question briefly, but we can keep going.
You did mention that it's best to do iridology after the age of, was it 12?
Well, the immune system, I feel like, and just what the maturity builds up by then. At least 8 to 10 to 12 years old, somewhere in there. It's not to say that you can't do it earlier, but there's just so many changes that have the opportunity to happen in that window that's outside of what you were born with, that's a good number to go with. It's just somewhere in the age of 8 to 12 years old is a good time. And that's just my opinion. That's not really backed up in any of the textbooks or anything, but when we come into this world, there's immediate interventions, that we can talk about any of those interventions, from the moment a nurse or a doctor grabs you and takes you away, to the first bite of food, to the first sound, the introduction to being in school, religion, movies and television, other family members, just being in the world. We get altered quite a bit in those first 10 years. So, and really, under 5 years old is the most clearest you're probably ever going to see anyone's irises, because, and that's if you were raised really healthy as a baby, because you haven't quite been influenced by all of that stuff I mentioned, and you hopefully haven't been influenced by the toxicity of bad food and water and stuff like that. But a lot of that stuff in the first 10 years of our life can change the color a little bit.
That would be so interesting to do an iridology assessment on a less than 5-year-old, and
Yeah.
then assess it again at like 11.
Are you familiar with Zach Bush? Dr. Zach Bush?
Yes, who isn't?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's that one video where he talks about, I think he's in the Philippines when he delivers a baby, and he talks about seeing the universe in the baby's eyes, and he gets really emotional talking about it. And it's kind of what I was talking about, is like, there's just that innocence that we lose pretty quickly after we get here, because of all the interventions. Like, there's just things that influence that. And so, yeah, and I haven't had the experience of doing that, because when you did it, and I'm telling you to hold your head still and kind of turn left. Like, you can't tell a 1-year-old to do that kind of stuff. You might get lucky real quick. I probably would actually take the camera off the stand and just try to do it by hand real quick, but yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people that I know anyway that have had a lot of experience of getting like, a 6 month old or a 1 year old's good iris photos and then comparing it again when they're like 25 years old or something. But that would be interesting. I'd love to be able to do that.
It would be so interesting. Now, I have a comprehensive report, and what I love about these reports is that it links things together because we're also interconnected, like within our bodies. So when you're talking about the kidney, it talks about how the kidney's detoxification extends into the skin, right? And so the skin is largely connected with the kidneys. And it
It's
just kind
like your
of
third
ties
kidney.
yeah, yeah. And then you also talk about the lungs and how the lungs operate in our body, and then the oxygen and how the trees are the lungs of Earth. And that's fascinating. It's like when you read this report, it really puts you in that space of, oh, we are all connected. Our entire system is one magical machine that works without us having to tell it. And then to extend outward, it works like nature works.
I think what you just said is a good answer to your first question of what does it mean to skill spiritually first. And that's a good way to start is just acknowledging what you just said there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to talk specifically. Okay, so let's say we're looking at the lymphatic system, and I'm reading about your description, and it says, okay, what can you do to move your lymph fluid to enhance circulation? Using a mini trampoline or rebounder only 10 minutes a day will help circulate your lymph. The bouncing can be gentle, and your toes do not even need to leave the surface for this motion to be effective. And then it goes on to say, while you are bouncing, say out loud the following: I am dot dot dot. I can dot dot dot. I choose dot dot dot. I will dot dot dot. I create. I have. I love. I enjoy. Repeat this throughout your exercise session. Saying these words positively affects your emotions, thoughts, and every cell of your body. That is incredible.
Yeah, just positive affirmations daily. And you don't even have to say all of those. Just say, I choose love today. And just
Yeah.
say that over and over again while you're bouncing up and down, shaking your body. And I
Yes.
know it sounds so crazy to some people who are not into the woo woo stuff, but it's just like, and to take it a step further, if you do that barefoot on the ground, it's even better. You talk about being
Oh,
connected and just shaking. And I mean, that's what your trees are out here doing. You're talking about the lungs and the trees. I look out right now and these trees are all just waving around and their feet are on the ground. And it's just like they're happy and they feel good. And that's what we should be doing too.
yeah, yeah, and then, in animals, if you watch them, every time they have, like, a fight or flight, after the fight, they shake it off.
Yeah.
We just sit at our desk, and we just deal with the stress, and we sit all day.
Yeah. Buried as deep as we can and inside.
And then each, report also has lists like nutrients, herbs, foods, and activities that support the lymph. And so it does that for everything: the respiratory system, epidermis, kidney, liver. It's so incredible, this report.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When I say it, I'm giving you the keys. Like it's everything, and it's you don't have to do all of those things. It's really just pick where you're at in the moment. And I also tell people it's more about also before you see because that can be overwhelming to a lot of people to see five things with five more things below them of all these things that you could or should be doing. And it's like look at like two different sections that you may have the lower scores on. There may be one thing in both of those that is beneficial for both those areas of your body. And also, what is something you can stop doing? I always tell before we pick up something else, put one thing down. We're all carrying something that's probably not serving us well, and just set that down first, and then pick one of those activities or one of those herbs, one of those foods to change something before you take on something else. And it's like we so do that in this society now. We're always like, oh, I got to start taking vitamin D. Or someone said I need to take a probiotic. Well, if you're doing something that's not serving you well, the vitamin C and the probiotic are not going to matter. You're just adding on more. It's just more weight to carry. So yeah, that's where I tell people to start out. When you see that big, long, comprehensive report with all these recommendations, that's like a lifelong thing. You don't have to just start them all right now. It's stop doing something and try to find something to incorporate that serves more than one area of the report.
Yeah, in my report, ginger comes up a lot.
There
So
you
not
go.
just go and eat ginger all day long. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
you may hate ginger. Like you may literally just want to puke every time you smell it. So maybe the ginger's not the one for you. That's why there's so many other options, you know?
right, right. And that goes back to we are our own experts on ourselves, and we have to slow down in order to know what's right for us. Like when you talk to herbalists, they sit with a plant. They'll sit with a plant for like 3 months or 6 months to
Yeah.
really understand that plant, right? And that's really slowing down. And can we do
Yeah.
that with like, let's say if I'm gonna incorporate one of these herbs into my diet, I hope that I would just take the one herb and use it every day and see how I
Yeah.
feel. Not very good at this kind of thing. I'm actually very speedy as well. So the reminder to slow down is really useful.
Yeah. Natalie has a plan out here on the farm to build a spiral, which is, we're already building it, but it'll take probably a couple years to get it where it's like literally at least waist high as you walk through the spiral. And we want it to be a complete herb spiral and let people actually walk through it to see what herbs call out to them. So if you've had this report and you've got like all these herbs and it's just like, well, let's just go see. Let's just go see if something stands out or calls to you. And that would be the one maybe to go with, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I can't wait till that's ready.
Yeah.
And if people are familiar with muscle testing, you could go down that list of herbs and muscle test it yourself. That's
Yeah.
you just your own higher self, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this iridology, it needs to be specifically done, so it always needs to be done in person because you're taking the photo. Somebody couldn't take a picture of their eye and just send it to you.
They have, yes. I do have what I call online instructions that I can email people. There are ways to get pretty good photos with your cell phone, but you do have to get. It has to involve someone else. It never can be like in a selfie form. And then I have had people who have went to like professional photographers and had like just as good of pictures as I take. Those people have had blue eyes though, which are a lot easier to photograph. Uh, Hazel or brown eyes, I don't know how that would work if someone doesn't actually have an iris cam. But there are ways of doing it where you don't have to come see me. But I do always want people who can to come see me. And it's I remember my original mentor that you mentioned, Ruben Schwartz. He didn't, he was Amish, so he didn't have the camera and he didn't have the technology. He just did the light and lens, and people came from all over the world to see him. And people do that to see Dr. Pezic as well. So it's like there is a connection and from the beginning to the end. And I do always take my camera when I do health fairs and at the event that you were at and stuff. So I do try to make myself available. And my camera does come with a fire and waterproof traveling case that I can take on airplanes. But I haven't gotten into that world yet of flying around and doing in this. But it's a possibility to go anywhere with it. Yeah.
Right. So if a bunch of people wanted to get together and fly you in to do like an evening of iridology, they could do that,
Sure.
right? Great. Yeah, so right now you're located out of Amboy, and I want to talk a little bit about, I know we were supposed to be talking just about iridology today, but I recall seeing, I think it was probably a social post where you were showing a men's group. And there was a lot of hugging going on with the men and everything. And I thought that was just so beautiful. It seemed like it was really well attended. And was that done in Amboy? You have a community there that
That was probably an event in Portland, I'm guessing. I haven't taken any photos of the group that I lead out here in Amboy because it's fairly new. But yeah, I'm definitely involved in men's work and think it's important. That I first dipped my toe into that in, I guess, mid 2021. Um, you know, the I guess the reason and the way I got into that was recovering from alcohol and getting divorced all at the same time in 2020. Here I was, a 40-year-old man going, where did I go wrong here? How did I mess this up? And really a lot of beating myself up and just self devaluation and everything. And I just was like kind of surprised by it. I was like, what is this men's work thing? Like what is this? And so I realized for the first time in my life that it's not healthy to suppress your emotions and to uh, numb yourself with alcohol and all this stuff. And it was just like this huge awakening. And once I felt it, and I think it happens to a lot of men who end up in men's work and get healing from it, you got to share it with others. And so, yeah, my original mentor in the men's work is Dan Doty, and I remember it was so weird that I'd never heard of him, and I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewing someone else, and he was just talking about this man who was taking, at the time, young men out into the wilderness who were like just troubled, just got out of high school or something, and maybe had gotten in trouble with the law. And something hit me with that because I was like, man, I wish I would have done that in my early 20s because I was really out of control in my 20s. And so I looked him up, and he kind of transitioned more into like these retreats and taking in all men, and ended up going on. I did probably 3 months of like Zoom work with him, and then he put on a retreat in Maine, and we went on a canoeing trip with people from all over the world that week, and then that led me into Sacred Sons, and that may be where some of the photos you're talking about came from. And they do amazing work, and so does Dan. But they have huge groups, like they have 500 men show up to some of these events, and it just creates a safe space where men feel comfortable around other men expressing their thoughts and emotions and all the traumas that we go through and things that we've been so scared to talk about for so many years. I mean, I bought the line that crying is a sign of weakness and you should never do it, so much that even as a teenager, when I had the ability to do it alone, I wouldn't do it. I would definitely not cry in front of somebody else, especially another man, but I wouldn't even do it by myself. And when I put down the bottle and I realized that there was this place and these things that I could do and it was okay and no one was going to hate me for it or think that I was weak, the floodgates opened. Like that stuff stayed in my body all those years. Like there was so many things. Like, I mean, I lost probably three really close friends between the age of 15 and 30 that I didn't feel the pain of that at all because I just numbed it with alcohol. I lost my mother in 2015. I just didn't feel any of that stuff. I didn't allow myself to. And all that stuff came pouring out like in 2021. There was so many things that were occurring at once that I was just an emotional wreck, but it was like this wreck that needed to finish wrecking. Like I needed to total the car and get a new one. So the new one is here in front of you now. And it's like, I don't suppress any of it anymore. And I don't care who sees it or judges it. It took me probably 2 months to get over my dog dying recently. And I did not rush that. I sat with it. He meant the world to me. He was all I had for like 18 months living alone. It was just us. And it was like, it was really painful to lose him. And the old me would have just not, no way would I shed a tear for my dog. Like I wouldn't even shed one for my mother. How could I shed one for my dog? It's like, so, and the message I just want to send out on that is to men is that it doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. It's literally the opposite. You become so much, you're weakening yourself because you're holding on to it. It is a huge weight and a burden that you don't have to carry, and you become much stronger by releasing it. And so what I'm doing with the one now is the same that all the other ones that I mentioned are doing, is we're just creating a safe space to hold that, and it's confidential, and you can, nothing is too big for it. We can talk about anything. I've seen everything from just divorce, dogs dying, to sexual abuse, physical abuse, traumas, and all that stuff get released, and it's a beautiful thing.
Right. And I feel like, I mean, when I saw those images, it was just so heartwarming and just because the men need this. I was also listening to a podcast, I think it's called Men This Way, and they were talking about a movie called The Masks We Wear. And I think it's specific to men. Like men are known to wear masks from the time you're very young, right?
Hmm.
And it's beautiful when they can gather. And I do see men tend to numb themselves, whether it's alcohol, drugs, media, whatever it is, they're doing a lot of coping, numbing mechanisms. And
Yeah.
it's really important for these men's gatherings to happen, like you said, for the teens, sort of like a rite of passage that we don't do anymore. But instead of like a rite of passage, it could very well just be like a rite of connection, right? And being around men and understanding that it's safe to feel your emotions and actually it's very healthy and builds your strength. And
Yeah.
I wish
It's
everyone.
it's a it's another thing that we have shifted and suppressed, like we were talking about with agriculture in the last 100 years. I mean, men used to gather and talk. You had tribes, you had all kinds of community meetings, and you still have a lot of church groups that have a men's group. And that's usually more like business related and stuff like that. But just, we've really just gotten away from just the community aspect of just sitting around and talking amongst men about just anything, much less the hard times that we're going through. And it's like it's just, there's a huge difference there between men and women on how we do that. Like the typical thing of like it's barbershop talk and beauty shop talk. Well, if the woman comes in and says, I just found out my man's cheating on me. Well, the women gather around him and me, and they're like, you can come stay with me, girl. You come with us. We got you. We're going to take care of you. Well, the men, if a man sits down in the barbershop chair and says, my wife was cheating on me, well, we're just going to be like, well, you got to get rid of her, and you're going out with us tonight, and we're going to get hammered drunk, and we're going to find you a new woman. And it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Where's the space being held for the man? It's like, come on. And so, and I think I talked to you about it on how the grief, like we're so much different on the grief aspect too, of like we suppress it, and then the women who do hold the space for everybody in a grieving situation, like when someone passes, you all almost forget to do it in those situations. So
Yeah.
it's like the pendulum is swings on the barbershop aspect or the locker room talk, all that kind of stuff. But then the grief part, we just refuse to do it, and we suppress it any way we can. And you all hold that space to the point where you forget that you didn't even grieve yourself. So, yeah, it's really about slowing down. We're just in too big of a damn rush on everything, from the food to our emotions to everything.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the lesson. And that's the goal is to really slow down and pass that on to our children. It's
Yeah,
okay. It's okay to just sit and do nothing,
yeah.
right? And
That is
also,
something that's coming up a lot. I don't know if it's been around before, but it just seems like it's getting bigger in this shift that we're having of people realizing that we've got work to do so that our children don't have to do it. And that's not just the building wealth and handing things down physically, materialistically to our kids. It's like we're handing them stuff that's going beyond what we realize. And It's stuff that we came into this world with from our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents. It goes back as many as three great grandparents that we all have that knowledge now, and it's up to us to at least work on it a little. You may not be able to heal it all in your short time on this earth, but anything you can keep from handing down to your kids is very beneficial.
Yeah, and that goes back to the iridology because when you do these reports, it does show you your generational predispositions, and that includes, your mental and emotional state, right? And so also when I look at these reports, I look at it with like curiosity. Like when I see these generational ties, I will say, "Oh, that's interesting." I'm not wearing it as my hat because I don't do things like that. I totally believe in epigenetics. Like I can shift anything, right? If we put our minds to it, we can shift anything. But it is very interesting to see and to notice and then be able to sort of shift that.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, did you want to share one last story? And this is the one about you working on the land with your grandfather.
Oh yeah, sure. I don't mind sharing that. So that's probably not my only experience, but my biggest one so far of what people are calling ancestral healing. And I feel very lucky because it just kind of it fell in my lap. And I just so it starts with a few years ago. I decided to talk to my dad about a little bit of this journey I've been on over the last few years, and sharing some about the iridology stuff with him on how we're influenced by our ancestors and stuff. And so I was asking a lot of questions because I don't know much about my family beyond my grandparents. My grandfather and my grandmother on my dad's side I knew until I was an adult, and my grandfather on my mom's side is the only one that I knew. Her mother died before I was ever born. So I asked him a lot of questions about like where did grandpa like come from? What was his upbringing? Like all I know is that he was a World War II veteran. He was the police chief and the sheriff of our town and county growing up, and he was a farmer. Really just tough man is all I could really think of about him. And so I told dad this story uh, about how grandpa didn't really show any emotion. He wasn't necessarily mean. I mean, he drew a hard line with me on the farm and stuff, but there was one instance where I had to spend the entire summer literally just picking up rocks. Like we had cleared these fields off and cut all the trees down, and we were going to sow it in clover, which all of that was not knowledge I had at the time because I was only like 8 years old. All I know is I had to follow my grandfather who was driving a tractor and pulling a wagon, and I had to pick up any rock that was as big as my fists or bigger and throw it on that wagon to get it out of the field, so that it wouldn't become it needed to be a hay field, so we didn't want a bunch of rocks in it. And it's summertime in the South. It's 98 degrees. The heat index feels like 110. I'm out there just sweating, picking up rocks, eating dust all day, and I do this for days on end to the point that one day I can't take it anymore. And I literally tell him that I am done with this. Like I'm walking home. Like I'm not going to do this anymore. And he jumps off the tractor and grabs a tobacco stick and like literally shakes it at me and starts yelling at me, telling me that I am absolutely going to keep doing this and I'm not going anywhere. And I remember it just shocked me so much because I got into some trouble when I was a kid that age. I was into everything. And but that was sent him to a whole nother level for some reason. And I couldn't understand it then. And I never understood it all these years. Here I am 40 years old, still going, wonder why he got so mad at me that day. And so when I'm having this conversation with my dad, he tells me that where we were picking up those rocks and clearing off that field, there used to be a log cabin there that my grandfather was born in. And like it already been torn down way before we cleared the trees or anything. And he's like, you literally were standing right there where he grew up. And he tells me that when my grandfather was my age, 8 years old, that his father abandoned them and just left the family, married another woman, moved like 200 miles north to Louisville, and started this whole other life and just left them. And I also look exactly like my grandfather. Every stage of my life to where I'm at right now, when he was in his 40s, he looked just like this. And when I was 8 years old, I looked just like he looked when he was 8 years old. They used to show me black and white pictures when I was that age and asked me if I remember having that picture took. And I'd be like, no, I don't. And just, I'd be really confused about it. And everybody would laugh. And it was like in black and white. Of course, it wasn't me, but it was my grandpa. And so my grandfather in that moment saw the little boy abandoning him the same way his father had abandoned him in that exact same spot. I don't know, 50 years earlier. I don't know how long it was. And I ended up getting off the phone with my dad. Like, I still wanted to have all this conversation with him, but I had to let him go. And I was walking on a hiking trail while I was talking to him. And I just kind of got off the trail and went in the woods, and I just kind of got down on my knees and I started crying, and I prayed for forgiveness for my great grandfather. Asked my grandfather to forgive me for attempting to abandon him that day, and letting him know that I forgive him for getting so angry at me. And it was just the weirdest thing of like not realizing it. It was literally like I had weights on my shoulders that someone took off all of a sudden. And it was like, wow, is that ancestral healing? Did I just do that? And it's never, the weight never came back. And so that's just one example of ancestral healing to me. It can mean so many different things to so many other people, but there are indications of self-esteem and abandonment type issues in my iris report that was done on me over 10 years ago. That's kind of an answer to that now. There are some things in iridology reports that you're just like, this just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's because we're carrying stuff like what my great grandfather did to my grandfather that I got yelled at when I was 8 years old. Like, we carry that kind of stuff in our bodies, and we don't always get all these answers. But I feel really fortunate because one opening like that makes me just open to believe any of it, that this is possible, that this could be this. And
Mm.
regardless of being able to put a name and a face to it, I still can put that energy out through prayer and meditation of forgiveness and just acceptance that this could be what this is, and I'm okay with it either way. Yeah, that was the one story on that. And then I've got another brief one where on forgiveness that doesn't have anything to do with my lineage, but I feel like it's something quick I just want to say without telling the long story like I just did that one. I dealt with a shoulder injury for 20 years, like throbbing pain that scan after scan, nobody could tell me anything. No chiropractors, no MRIs, no nothing. I had one doctor one time tell me that there was a slight impingement in my shoulder. And of course, said there's, pain medications and all this you can take, but there's really nothing wrong with your shoulder. Well, it took just someone simply asking me the question, when do you remember this pain starting? And I told them about a hit I took in football that year. And they were like, well, what led up to that? And I was like, well, I didn't want to play that year. I wanted to quit. And I had a coach that when I told him I was quitting, that I wasn't going to start this season. This was like summer 2-a-day practice. We hadn't played a game yet. That broke down and cried and told me that this was the worst day of his life and made me feel like I was going to let down the team, my friends, my community, all this stuff. And I felt horrible. And I came back and played that year. And long story short, forgiving him in that moment, literally within 5 minutes, the shoulder pain went away and it's been gone ever since. So I was just holding on to anger and resentment and just bitterness towards him for making me play that final year when I didn't want to. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw that one out there too, that, forgiveness in your iris report is associated with kidneys and skin, like we were talking about, but it can go much deeper than that. It can be shoulder pain too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Like that literally has to do with emotions. A
Yeah,
physical pain has to do with emotions.
yeah.
It's the root
It
cause.
can go all the way back to 100+ years ago, or it can go back to high school and
Yeah,
everywhere in between.
right. We just never know. Thank you. That was really insightful and helpful. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about iridology?
I don't think so. I want people to know about it. I want people to experience the new advancements that have happened over the last 20 years. You know, when I like to mention Ruben Schwartz and Dr. Pezic because that's two different forms of iridology. It's the old and the new. Dr. Pezic made a lot of changes to iridology after his years of mentoring with Bernard Jensen, who's what most people know as the name of iridology. Um, he spent 40 years as a psychiatrist and did iris analysis with all of those patients, which led him to make his own changes, particularly to the brain area. And so when I went to his school, there had to be some unlearning to do the learning. And
Mm,
there's a lot of people that aren't open to that. There's a lot of people that think that this stuff is set in stone and it can't be changed. And I just want to invite people to, just be open to it. You don't have to change anything if you don't want to, but be open to letting it come in. And if it does set change in you, then let it be. Um, the old iridology tends to be more on the physical and not pay attention to these thoughts and emotions as much. So that was a big seller for me, and I have the lived experience to agree with it. So yeah, I offer three different kinds. I do what I call a live eye reading, which is the old style with just a light and lens and just a brief introduction to people. Um, I can usually tell your strengths and weaknesses as far as your constitution overall. And I do a brief report, which is about a third of what you got with the comprehensive. It's you get you get your iris photos, you get a brief introduction of what holistic iridology is. It comes with a chart, and then you do get a brief report on like low, medium, and high of certain areas of the body, and then the comprehensive just covers everything.
it covers everything.
Yeah.
And so are you saying that if somebody were to find an iridologist outside of you, they would have to determine whether they are old school or new school?
Well, you don't have to. There's still good positive information and getting the old style. The only thing, like the weird thing for me now, is knowing that what are called radial furrows, that some people call spokes, and it's the lines you see in the iris. For years, everyone has always said that those are parasites, and it's just simply not true. Um, Luckily, when they tell people that, they get it right a lot of the times because like over 80% of this country has parasites. So it's like you're not really, they're still doing good and not doing harm. And the whole creed of do no harm first is still what's being practiced with iridology. So I don't want to knock it or say anything negative about the old stuff. I just would encourage all people to be open to the new versions and take some courses and look into it to see that it has made some major advancements over the last 20 to 30 years.
Okay, that's good to know.
I still have a folder called Old Iridology Notes that I keep because there's still really good information in there. And Ruben Schwartz absolutely was an intuitive and had a wizardly like vibe to him and carried his own weight in it for sure. So I don't ever want to undermine and not forget where I came from.
Right, right. Great. Thank you. What would you estimate would be the amount of iridologists that are around, like in the US? Do you think there might be one per state?
Yes, there's definitely one per state.
Okay,
Um,
great.
yeah, the International College of Iridology has a list of everyone in each. Well, anyone that's graduated from Dr. Pezik's school, the International Institute of Iridology, is listed on there, and I
Okay.
think almost every state does have someone.
Oh, fantastic. That's good.
Yeah.
So that way everyone can have access to it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I really appreciate you too, Belinda. You share information about me with other people, and I just really appreciate it. And then this sharing with people. So I really appreciate you putting it out there.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. I'm so fascinated by it. And now that I have my report, it's even more fascinating. So I'm so excited just for everybody to discover it because it's so nice to have access to health, that's like overall and incorporates everything, your mind, your emotions, spirituality, and the physical, because I it's too limiting to just stick with allopathic medicine that basically just wants to break everything apart. And that's not how we thrive.
Yeah. We need all those parts that they remove. They all have a meaning. They're all there for a reason.
Yeah, they're all there for a reason. And it's we the more that we know, the better we can do. And so to know that there's practitioners like you that can offer a whole health report just by looking at the eyes, it's non-invasive and you get so much information. There just would not be any reason why not to do it, except for they're not close to you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Melinda.
Bye.